Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. Your support helps us bring you more stories like this. Now, let's begin. It was the 8th of February 1862, along the Coorong in South Australia. Winter rain had turned the track to mud between Adelaide and Melbourne, and the mail coach moved slowly past the scattered settlements that marked the route. At Salt Creek, 66 miles from Wellington, stood an establishment known as the Traveller's Rest. It was kept by Mrs. Catherine Martin and her husband Malachi, a man with a hard face and a past that some preferred not to discuss. The inn served those who travelled the long road between the colonies, offering beds, meals and stabling for horses. Inside, a young woman named Jane McManaman worked as a domestic servant. She was 29 years of age, born in Ireland, and had been in the colony for 7 years. She earned 11 shillings each week, with food and accommodation provided. She was known to be careful with money, rarely taking her wages, instead asking Mr. Martin to keep them safe. Over 2 years of service, her savings had accumulated quietly. She wrote regularly to her sister Margaret, sharing news of her work and her plans. By February, she had spoken of returning to Ireland, of taking her £70 and going home. Letters stopped that month. By April, no word had come. What the mail coach driver found at the Traveller's Rest would lead to a burial on a hill, an exhumation, and a trial that would grip the colony. The inn stood alone on the flat land near the water. Behind it stretched empty country, scrub and sand and the holes where wombats burrowed. The nearest neighbour lived 11 miles north at a place called Woodwells. When the coach came through, it brought passengers who ate quickly and left. When it did not come, the house fell quiet. Jane McManaman rose early each morning. She lit the fire, heated water, and prepared bread. She swept the floors, washed the linen, and tended to whatever tasks Mrs. Martin required. She worked methodically, speaking little, keeping her thoughts to herself. When the coach driver Peter Nichols stopped on the 2nd of February, he found her in good spirits. They spoke briefly. She served him tea. He continued south toward Adelaide, N. The 8th of February he returned. The coach moved slowly along the track, wheels turning through mud. A quarter-mile from the inn he passed William Wilson, a carpenter who also worked occasionally for Mr. Martin. The man was walking away from the Traveller's Rest, heading north. Mr. Nichols raised his hand in greeting. Mr. Wilson did not stop her. When the coach reached the inn, Mr. Nichols knocked at the door. No answer came. He knocked again. After some delay, the door opened. Mr. Martin stood in the threshold, alone. He let the driver inside. Mrs. Martin was not present. The house seemed different somehow, though Mr. Nichols could not say precisely how. The two men prepared the evening meal together. Later they were joined by another traveller, a man named Stockdale. The three ate in silence. During the meal, Mr. Martin spoke. He said that Jane McManaman had left his employment. She had gone away in a covered wagon, he said, heading south toward Mount Gambier. She had decided suddenly, he explained, without waiting for Mrs. Martin to return. Mr. Nichols listened. He found this strange. He had known Jane for 2 years. She was not impulsive. She was owed more than £50 in wages. It made no sense that she would simply leave, that she would abandon money she had carefully saved. Nichols said nothing. He finished his meal, saw to his horse, and continued north toward Adelaide. But the conversation stayed with him. The empty house, the absent woman, the carpenter walking away along the road. By late April, no letters had arrived. Margaret Macmanaman, Jane's sister, grew anxious. She had always worried. The sisters had come to the colony together in 1855, young women leaving Ireland for work. They had stayed close despite the distance between them. Jane wrote regularly. She shared news. She spoke of her savings, of her plans to return home. Then the letters stopped. Margaret contacted Mr. William Carter, a gentleman in Wellington who had employed Jane years before she confided her concerns. Mr. Carter began making inquiries. He spoke with those who might have seen Jane. He asked at the coaching stations along the Melbourne Road. No one had word of her. No one recalled seeing her leave. The trail was cold. R. Carter contacted the police. Officer William Rawlinson of the Wellington station was assigned to investigate. He approached it as a routine matter at first. Women sometimes left their employment without notice. They moved to other settlements, took new positions, went to stay with friends. He travelled to Salt Creek to speak with Mr. Malachi Martin. Barbara Martin received him cordially. He explained that Jane had left in February. A group of her friends had stopped at the inn while travelling south, he said. Jane had decided to join them as far as Maria Creek. From there, she had planned to walk to her sister's residence, which was nearby. It was all quite simple, Mr. Martin assured him. There was nothing mysterious about it, but Officer Rawlinson found the explanation unsatisfying. The timeline was vague. The friends Mr. Martin mentioned could not be identified. No one along the route recalled seeing Jane. The distance from Maria Creek to Margaret's residence was considerable. A woman would not walk it alone. When the officer searched the inn, he found Jane's knitting discarded in the kitchen. He found a pair of her shoes in the room she had occupied. Mrs. Catherine Martin was wearing 2 rings that were later identified as belonging to Jane by late May. Officer Rawlinson's suspicions had grown. He took the unusual step of placing an undercover officer at the inn, disguised as a guest. The officer observed Mr. and Mrs. Martin. He listened to conversations. He watched for any sign, any clue. None came. The house kept its secrets. No one spoke of Jane McManaman. On the 29th of May, a native Australian known as Mickey brought news to William Allen at Wood Wells. A body had been found, he said, a young woman. It was concealed in a wombat hole, half buried, approximately half a mile from the Traveller's Rest. Mr. Allen acted quickly. He sent an urgent message to the nearest police station, Dobar. Police trooper received the message and relayed it to headquarters. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, he also saddled his horse and rode directly to Wellington to inform Officer Rawlinson. The senior officer gathered men and rode south. They arrived at the burial site as evening approached. The location was remote, hidden among the scrub. The body had been wrapped and concealed with care, as if the person who placed it there had hoped it would never be found. The officers exhumed the remains carefully. They noted the position, the condition, the items found nearby. The body was transported to Wood Wells for an official inquest. This was held on the 2nd of June. Witnesses were called. Evidence was examined. The body was soon identified as Miss Jane McManaman, the missing domestic servant from the Traveller's Rest. BRM. William Allen, who had first received the news from Mickey, took it upon himself to make a coffin. He buried Jane on a hill approximately 200 meters from his house. It was a quiet burial, attended by few, but the Crown Solicitor, recognizing the need for thoroughness, ordered that the body be disinterred once more. A qualified medical expert was required to conduct a proper examination and establish the cause of death beyond doubt. Dr. Goss, a respected physician, was summoned from Adelaide specifically for this purpose. He travelled to Wood Wells and performed the autopsy with methodical care. After his examination was complete, he announced his findings. Miss Jane McManaman had died by strangulation. The marks upon her neck were clear. The manner of death was deliberate. The evidence now pointed unmistakably toward Malachi Martin. He was the last person known to have seen Jane alive. The proximity of his residence to the burial site could not be ignored. His claim that Jane had left with friends had never been credible. The inquest concluded that Mr. Malachi Martin should face trial on the charge of willful murder. Dr. Goss conducted his examination at Wood Wells with the thoroughness expected of a physician trained in the forensic methods of the period. The body, though it had been buried for several months, showed sufficient evidence for him to form a professional opinion. He observed the condition of the neck, where distinct marks indicated that pressure had been applied. The hyoid bone, a small structure in the throat, showed signs of fracture consistent with manual strangulation. He noted the position of the body when it was discovered, the manner in which it had been concealed, and the items found with it. In his written report, Dr. Goss stated that death had occurred as a direct result of compression to the throat and neck. The manner of the concealment suggested that the body had been moved shortly after death and placed deliberately in the wombat hole, where it would be hidden from casual view. Soil samples were taken from the burial site. The clothing was examined and catalogued. Among Jane's possessions found at the inn were letters she had written, but not yet sent, her personal effects including the rings Mrs. Martin had been wearing, and a ledger where she had kept account of her wages. Officer Rawlinson compiled evidence methodically. He obtained statements from Peter Nichols, the mail coach driver, who confirmed that Jane had been present on the 2nd of February but was absent on the 8th. He obtained statements from Mr. William Carter, Jane's former employer, who testified that Jane had entrusted him with £50 and had spoken of her intention to return to Ireland. He obtained statements from neighbours and travellers who had stopped at the Travellers' Rest in the weeks before Jane's disappearance. The pattern that emerged was clear. Jane McManaman had vanished on or shortly after the 8th of February 1862, and no one beyond Malachi Martin had seen her leave. If you are finding this case as compelling as we are, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. It truly helps us continue researching and sharing these forgotten stories from history. We also read every comment, so let us know your thoughts on this case below. Now, let us continue. A warrant was issued for the arrest of Malachi Martin on the charge of murder. He was taken into custody without resistance and remanded to Adelaide to await trial. During questioning, he maintained his original statement. Jane had left with friends, he insisted. He knew nothing of her death. When asked about the rings his wife wore, he claimed Jane had given them as a gift. When asked about her wages, he said she had taken what was owed. The answers satisfied no one. The trial was set to commence in August 1862. The trial was scheduled to begin on the 20th of August 1862, but complications arose. William Wilson, the carpenter, who had been walking away from the Travellers' Rest on the day Jane disappeared, had initially told police that Mr. Martin had sent him on an errand 20 miles distant. However, while travelling to Adelaide to testify, Mr. Wilson stopped at Wellington. After a night of heavy drinking, he told the publican, Mr. William Butcher, that he had seen Jane's dead body at Salt Creek. This confession contradicted his earlier testimony entirely. The authorities arrested him as an accessory to the crime. The trial was postponed. When proceedings finally commenced on the 2nd of December 1862, both Malachi Martin and William Wilson stood accused. Both entered pleas of not guilty. The prosecution presented its case systematically. Peter Nichols testified about his visits to the inn, about seeing Jane alive on the 2nd of February and finding her absent on the 8th. He described meeting William Wilson on the road, walking away from the Travellers' Rest. He recounted Mr. Martin's claim that Jane had left in a covered wagon, and his own confusion at this explanation, for he had passed such a wagon at Rankine Station and had spoken with its occupants, but had neither seen Jane nor heard any mention of her. William Wilson gave evidence next. His testimony was damaging to Mr. Martin, but cast doubt on his own reliability. He claimed that upon returning from his errand he had been informed that Jane had left for Mount Gambier. He said that later Malachi Martin had confessed to killing her and had threatened his life if he spoke. He had kept silent until confiding in Mr. Butcher. The court listened with skepticism. Mr. Wilson also revealed that he had proposed marriage to Jane shortly before her death, and she had accepted. Only Malachi Martin knew of this, he said. Whether this was truth or fabrication, none could say with certainty. Mr. William Carter testified that Jane had told him she possessed £70 in savings, held by Mr. Martin, and that she planned to return to Ireland. Malachi Martin chose not to testify in his own defence. After deliberation, the jury returned. Malachi Martin was found guilty of willful murder and sentenced to death. William Wilson was found guilty as an accessory after the fact and sentenced to 4 years hard labour. The verdict was reported in newspapers throughout the colonies. The case had drawn considerable attention, not merely for the violence of the crime, but for the betrayal it represented. Jane McManaman had entrusted her employer with her savings, the result of years of careful frugality. She had worked diligently, written faithfully to her sister, and planned to return home to Ireland. Instead, She had been strangled and buried in a wombat hole half a mile from where she slept. Malachi Martin was hanged at Adelaide Gaol on the 24th of December 1862. It was Christmas Eve. The execution was conducted according to the procedures of the time. Mr. Martin made only one statement before the drop fell. He said that William Wilson had never seen Jane's body at Salt Creek, that the carpenter had fabricated the entire confession. Whether this was truth or a final attempt to cast doubt, it changed nothing. The trap was sprung. Death was immediate. His body was buried within the jail grounds, as was customary for executed criminals. After the authorities had conducted the final autopsy on Jane's remains, she was buried once more at Wood Wells, where William Allen had first laid her to rest. In the 1920s, there were reports of a jam tin marking the grave, a humble memorial placed by someone who remembered. Later, a stone cairn was Ted, but by the middle of the 20th century, the exact location had been forgotten. The land changed hands, the memories faded. Few remembered the young woman from Ireland who had died at the Traveller's Rest. In 1966, a government surveyor and two local men, Alan Johnson and Arthur Reed, rediscovered the burial site. They confirmed the location by excavating carefully until they found her bones. In 1972, a concrete headstone was placed at the grave, and a memorial service was held. Though the site lies on private property, the fenced area can be seen from the highway by anyone who passes through Wood Wells. The Traveller's Rest no longer stands. The coaching route between Adelaide and Melbourne was eventually replaced by rail, then by sealed roads. Salt Creek remains a small settlement along the Coorong. The case of Jane McManaman is recorded in the archives of South Australia filed among the criminal trials of 1862. The details are preserved in court transcripts, in newspaper accounts, in the depositions taken by Officer Rawlinson during those months of searching. Beyond the hill at Wood Wells, the headstone stands. Wind moves across the flat country, the water of the Coorong shifts with the tide. Above the grave, the sky stretches wide and empty, as it did in February of 1862, when a young woman's letters stopped coming and no one knew why.